we were kind of like, well, are we completely missing the boat here? And late last year, we then tested a model, basically a platform working with a third party to bring basically access to all LLMs to our employees in a environment that is meeting all enterprise security demands, that allows us via APIs to integrate real REHAU company data. We did a soft launch now in January. And by end of April, we had already reached 10% of our installed user base. And mind you, this is only the soft launch. We haven't really started what we call wave 2, which will happen later this month. We also have the AI Factory, which is a team of experts when it comes to more complex workflows. That's where your average user then quickly hits a limit. Plus, that's where you start to incur additional token costs. So you need to be a bit careful before you build a silly workflow that does nothing but costs a lot of money. We are currently working on a more complex workflow-based use case. We call it the touchless invoice project. We're having our business service center handling thousands of invoices every month. And just imagine, I mean, this is an email. The email has a PDF attachment. The PDF attachment is an invoice. You have someone that actually, entering data from that invoice manually into SAP. Kind of crazy, but that's the reality. And I'm sure that's the reality across thousands of organizations.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the EUVC Corporate Podcast, where we explore how Europe's leading corporates are building, investing, and partnering for the future. Today, Jeppe and I are joined by Nils Wagner, CEO of REHAU New Ventures and part of the third generation of the family behind the REHAU Group, a global leader in materials, polymers, and advanced manufacturing. Nils' story is one of both continuity and reinvention. He trained as an architect, led REHAU's business in China, and now spearheads the company's external innovation and venture strategy from Zurich. His journey mirrors how many industrial giants are redefining innovation and how REHAU's pivot from venture building to corporate clienting is one of the most candid accounts of what actually works.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Nils, Jeppe and I are so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Andreas. Hi, Jeppe. Great to be here.
Nils, your career didn't start in the family business. You started architecture, a creative but different path. What made your return to REHAU, and how did those early years outside the company shape how you think about innovation today?
Well, you kind of grow up with family business. So yes, I did initially want to do something completely different, but then I think it was a sense of responsibility that kind of brought me back into the fold. My education as an architect didn't happen to be way off either. We do about 60 to 70% of our business with building and construction materials. So that in the end effect is relatively close to home. And, as an architect, at the end of the day, what do? You define a vision and you break that down into work packages. You assemble a multidisciplinary team. And, ultimately you want to lead that team to success. So that's pretty much what we do in business as well. So I did feel rather comfortable there.
And then tell me just a little bit about what China taught you, because China is definitely a different place from Europe and the rest of the world.
Definitely different. I do have to say though, we have much more in common with people in other parts of the world than we actually have differences. But there are some, let's say, significant market differences. Being in China and, coming from a company that's been successful in Europe and North America for many decades, we had to learn and understand that we need to adjust our product and service offering in order to meet the local market. So really making products and services fit for use, fit for the local requirements, required re-engineering, required innovation. So we couldn't just copy paste our successful models. And also in terms of go-to-market, we saw that there's actually a lot of potential in coming up with new or disruptive ways to bring our products to clients. A big difference compared to the very mature market environment that we see in Europe. Additionally, the whole topic of digitization. When I moved to China in 2012, I really kind of landed in a nation that was absolutely embracing digitization in all aspects of life. So the impact of digitization on our business was actually significant from day one. And so that also was a stark contrast to what you saw at the time in Europe and still see in Europe. Very much more hesitancy, very slower to adopt new technologies. So I would say those aspects really kind of stuck out in terms of a difference.
Yeah. And now you're back in Zurich and you're leading external innovation. Of course, having that experience from seeing China up close is absolutely important, and seeing how fast innovation actually can happen. I'd love to hear just what does it mean to lead external innovation at REHAU?
I mean, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is relatively simple. We're trying to bring the benefits of technological development, of digitization into the company. That's definitely what we're trying to do. So hoping to impact the way we work, hoping to increase our success in the market by embracing new technological trends. So that's definitely what we started off with, but it's been quite a journey, and we can get into that now as well. We started somewhere completely different to where we are today.
And then if we go back to when you started your venture efforts, you began with venture building. Can you talk a bit about why you thought venture building was the right place to start? And Jeppe, I'll of course also ask you about your take on that as an external observer of many CVC units.
My grandfather founded the business as a tech startup more than 75 years ago. I think that's very much in our DNA, and we grew organically over more than 75 years. So I think building things ourselves is just something we like to do. And frankly, we also thought, being present in quite mature, conservative industries, that there would just be a lot of potential for disruption. So our natural approach, I think, was really to go and say, hey, we can build new businesses ourselves and ultimately thereby capture new growth opportunities for REHAU. So that was our initial thesis. Happy to discuss what didn't work out so well in that process also.
Yeah, but maybe you can comment a bit about this trajectory from not having any corporate venturing activities to then starting to have them, and why you often see corporates starting with corporate venturing as their approach.
No, I think what's interesting is that normally we discuss build, partner, and invest as three verticals within corporate venturing. We could also discuss M&A and the early stage of that. But here, as Nils explained, I fully understand why they started with venture building, because it's in their genes, and maybe that pivots nicely into where my own opinion lies, and that is that it's corporate culture that will decide where you start, but it will also decide where you're going to be successful. And I think the many books that has been written about the topic, a lot of people also agree that it's more, how do you connect into the mother company here, REHAU, right? That will define how successful you are in what you do. And then again, as some of Nils's learnings will also share, that will be shared later, will also tell why, why is it challenging, right? So I think, Nils, maybe for you here, what were some of the challenges you saw in building companies?
As you start with something, you often then learn some of the most important lessons on the way. I think one thing we underestimated is how cash draining the whole venture building activity would be. As we know, you need to think in a portfolio. You need to build several opportunities in parallel. That really leads to significant cumulative cash drain, which is something that the organization needs to be willing to face. The other is, really, and this is a deep learning, and really was probably the biggest surprise. Frankly, it's almost impossible to hire an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurs is, the key ingredient to making early stage startups successful. You can, of course, hire very entrepreneurial managers at a later stage, but in the initial phase of any venture, you need that raw entrepreneurial force. And frankly, that's just something you cannot hire, and therefore, that often was one of the biggest challenges we had to get these ventures off the ground. Is you couldn't really find the right team. And then, I think something else that's very important. We quickly learned where we had somewhat of a chance for success, and where we simply lacked the deep understanding and skill, and definitely whenever we tried to build, kind of software-based product or maybe a platform model, that's where we actually really fell flat. So moving too far away from kind of our core strengths definitely is a big risk if you want to be in the business of building ventures.
How did you first think about the fact that, because venturing often connotates that you're doing stuff in the venture space, not just doing startups, but you're doing startups that should scale rapidly and become behemoths. And that, while it is, of course, expensive to build companies from the ground up, building a venture-backed company is even more expensive. And by definition, you also need to have a very clean cap table for that to be possible. Do you think, and I would love that your take on that, both of you, do you think that it's almost by definition impossible as a corporate to do real venture building that creates assets that are attractive to the normal VCs?
If I can have a first go at this, Jeppe, then glad for you to jump in. But I actually do think that the only way a corporate could successfully build a venture is if they fund it fully themselves, which is a very inefficient undertaking and again, hugely expensive. The minute and we did do this, I mean, we understood that to finance them ourselves was not going to be possible. So we said, okay, we need to bring in external capital. But that also meant we needed to make sure these ventures were investable. So meaning, we would have a minority share on the cap table, hope that we still wouldn't scare away third-party investors. The entrepreneurs, or let's say the founders, co-founders, they needed to have a majority share. And so that for us also was a process. At least I think we got there, but, maybe too little, too late kind of situation, where overall we just then decided to pivot in a different direction. And I would say that, actually CVC faces some similar challenges. So if you're building or if you're investing, a corporate really needs to think carefully about how they go about doing it.
I often say that the rule book of venture doesn't end because you come with a corporate mandate. They're still very much at play, and you got to be kosher for the normal venture rule book. Yeah, but you were about to say?
Yeah, so I think for me, I don't think there is the holy grail for this. Right? There's been so many tries about how to do it right. I think one of the previous calls we did with Intel Ignite, one of the things that they promote there is their CAP model, so their customer advisory board. So if you are a corporate and you basically sit down with your key account managers and your customers and understand their challenges, what is it that they need and what will they actually pay for before you set sail on this amazing endeavor as it is to build a new company, right? I think there's something in there that a lot of corporates can learn from. And then at the same time, as where you came from, Nils, this hiring talent, how do you actually hire talent? And then the question becomes, do you need that? Or have you created a culture within your organization where you can take some of that talent and then give them the responsibility of running this new company within, right? And do these speedboating activities as they are. And I think, if you play around with, allocating warrants to them or, shadow warrants so they can be part of the upside, then you can get there. But then again, as Nils said, right, the CapEx spending for this, is that what your organization really wants to do? And then again, leading into do the 80-20 model, right? Is it a strategic asset? Then we keep 80% of the ownership ourselves and give 20% for founders. And then, if it's then a financial and we send them fundraising and then you spin it around, right? That's also the opportunity. But I do get it, Nils, why you kind of said, okay, this is too complex for us and it doesn't fit. And then, now I'm just super eager to learn all the great stuff you're doing in the clienting space.
No, and happy to go into that. And then maybe just to help with the segue here, I think we took on board a lot of those learnings that you just mentioned. And I think at the end we had a model that was generally workable and investable. But things in the world started to change with a different dynamic as well. I mean, we started in the COVID phase, which I think we were able to handle quite well. But then, coming out of that V-shaped recovery, very buoyant market environment, we then saw a new reality as, Russia invaded Ukraine. And in most recent months, of course, also with the Iran war. So overall market volatility, market challenges really led to a shift in the way our organization was thinking. So we saw this kind of shift from, willing to take long-term bets to really making sure that, we took effective measures in the short term. And so that was a main factor also that impacted our activities as a corporate venturing unit. So we also then decided to shift much more towards short-term effectiveness, short-term impact, and that's ultimately what led us to drop the venture building activities and embrace the venture clienting approach.
So now you're doing venture clienting. That's the core focus of of how you approach your venture activities. Can you talk a bit about how you navigated going from the venture building phase to the venture clienting phase? And then I think we should go into a segment about the venture clienting purely. But how do you navigate through that? How do you close one thing down while you still open up another arm, so on?
Well, I think the most important part is to understand, the strategic paradigm shift and to embrace that. Because, if you've been working on something for a few years and, we started kind of late 2021 with venture building. And by the time, we pivoted, we had been doing it for 3 years. Now that's kind of super long in venture terms, right? But still there was, we could have just said, all right, we're kind of out, we need to close shop and move on. What we did, also what I did, is really embrace the paradigm shift from long-term to short-term impact and then come up with a plan how to execute on that. But it does, of course, mean you need to find a new team, also define the new process, the new model going forward. And at the same time, you need to downsize the venture building organization, and you need to handle your existing portfolio so that you don't, kind of burn the assets that you've built. And, that's kind of doing two things at once. You're winding down one business, you're building up another business. And for that, you just need a strong management team and, kind of focused execution. And we came through that actually quite well. So this has been this process was initiated about 18 months ago. And, now we're fully focused on venture clienting. We still hold a portfolio of ventures where we're invested. And of course, we manage that portfolio as well. We're still in contact with the different founders there, but we're relatively hands-off, let's say. And of course, also looking for a partner so that we can step by step then work towards an exit.
I'd love to ask both of you, what do you consider the core ingredients, core principles for successful corporate clienting?
As always, you need the right people, right? But the right people here really means that they have a good ability to empathize with our key stakeholders, and they need to quickly be able to develop an understanding of the business requirements. In venture clienting, you're first and foremost focused on internal customers. You need to understand their needs. You need to understand their pain points before you then go out and look for possible solutions. And the other quality that's really important is project execution. At the end of the day, this is about finding, testing, and implementing new tools. And so, yeah, I think customer centricity and execution skill is what's most important in venture clienting.
I think Nils is spot on, right? I couldn't have said it better myself, so fully agree with this. What I think would be interesting, if you could share a little bit on that, Nils, is how do you work in venture clienting with respect to the strategy of REHAU Group, right? So how are the tracks developed? Are you working closely with the strategy department, or are you up for finding the task yourself where it's meaningful to do venture clienting?
We always start with alignment on strategy. The REHAU Group is relatively broad, so we have different subgroups that are focused on certain industries. The first thing we need to know is what's your strategy, but more specifically, what's your digital strategy, and then we go into deep dives from there to really understand where the pain points are, and maybe just to put it in a bit broader context, when my grandfather founded the company, plastics was high tech and completely new. Now we're obviously in a quite a mature phase of this technology, and we're in many industries that are also quite mature. I think if you know a little bit about the German automotive industry, you then see the challenges that these mature industries and mature players face. So, we face similar challenges. So at the end of the day, it's more than just solving an operational problem, accumulated and looking into the future. It's about business transformation, right? Changing the way we do business in order to increase the value we can bring to the market, increase the value we can bring to the customers, and therefore hopefully extend the product lifecycle time and help to keep us relevant. So that's always the big picture that we need to be aware of. But again, always starting with alignment on strategy. We need to understand where the organization wants to get to so that we can effectively support that journey.
And where have you found early proof point of success when you collaborate with the core business? What would you, or said in a different way, how would you recommend others to address the problem of getting the collaboration to work?
Maybe there, just to cite some of the feedback we get when we sit down with the stakeholders. Often people are telling us, well, we've been working in the same way and manner for the last 15 to 20 years. And we understand that we should be working differently, but we're simply lacking the tools to do so. And if you know what's going on in the world of, let's say, startups, but also in the world of, SaaS and AI companies, we should know that there are thousands of possibilities to change the way people work. So then identifying a tool that, allows people to save time in tedious menial tasks, that allows people to automate certain processes and just free their mind for more higher value added tasks. That's a really rewarding kind of offer that you can bring to these people. It's like, when people have been in the desert for years and you finally hand them a glass of cool water, that goes down really well. And frankly, it's pleasing to see.
When I talk to the ecosystem, we have, the CVCs, we have the VCs and the founders. The VCs are also always standing there and saying to our dear corporate people, you and me, right? Why can't you just have a revenue case where, REHAU will go in, and when we do this collaboration, it's a paid trial and so forth. Can you share a little bit to those VCs that are listening in about those challenges?
I mean, that's actually built into our process, if I understood you correctly. A corporate working with a startup, that generally per se is extremely difficult. I mean, the minute we would involve our purchasing department and say, hey, look, we have a software or a SaaS supplier here, why don't you get them on board? First of all, I mean, these processes take a very long time. Second of all, they just wouldn't meet many requirements that a corporate purchasing department, expects in terms of auditing capabilities, but also, we would then quickly be asked to provide 2 other comparative offers.
Yeah, exactly.
That is kind of unique, and often, you spend months wrangling with these kind of corporate processes, which are all about risk mitigation, and there's a reason they're there. But we're kind of the API for the startup. So you need a unit that's able to not only speak the language, but we have our own process landscape, which is, let's say, enterprise compatible but completely independent. So we don't need 3 months to to establish a supplier in our system. It takes us literally a phone call and an email, and we can start collaborating. At the same time, I think, really understanding the needs of our stakeholders and translating those into a set of requirements, and then defining certain KPIs that will then measure the success of the solution by, that's again maybe a specific skill, but we do then actually test the solutions first. So there's always a test phase, a pilot phase, which then allows us to have hard facts and figures that we go back to our internal customers with. And then at the end of the day, it is an ROI based investment decision if they want to implement this or not. But without having that kind of interface, it just really wouldn't work. It's almost impossible to make it work otherwise.
Nils, let's spend the last 10 minutes on AI and how you're working to build AI into the company. The EU is working on an initiative that should help European corporates work better with AI and implement AI in their organizations. I think any one of us that are working in smaller units can really see the rapid changes and efficiency gains that we can have. But we also know that in corporates, it's a completely different landscape. And there's a lot of, one thing that's very clear with AI is that there's a lot of governance risk with regards to what does this AI actually go and do, because it's very hard to be on top of. Can you talk a bit about how you're thinking about bringing AI into the organization and your role as the corporate venturing unit to do that?
November 2022 is when ChatGPT 3.0 was released. Most viral product launch ever, 100 million users in 2 months. And this kind of seems like ages ago. And late last year, I was complaining that we hadn't done anything substantial to really bring those LLM capabilities into the organization. I mean, yes, we work with Microsoft. We have Copilot. There are some Copilot licenses in circulation. What people really do with it, I still don't understand. So, we were kind of like, well, are we completely missing the boat here? And so we decided to do something against it. And late last year, we then tested a model, basically a platform working with a third party to bring basically access to all LLMs to our employees in a environment that is meeting all enterprise security demands, that allows us via APIs to integrate real REHAU company data into the platform, and finally give people an environment where, frankly, they can just start to engage and work with different LLMs using REHAU data, building agents, and then potentially even building automation workflows. And so we tested that between October and December of last year. We did a soft launch now in January. And by end of April, we had already reached 10% of our installed user base. And mind you, this is only the soft launch. So we haven't really started what we call Wave 2, which will happen later this month. And so we offer the platform, and we have built a service offer around the platform. On the one hand, we have an AI Academy, self-learning, online-based platform with the different courses to really teach people from fundamentals all the way through to advanced workflow design, what they need to know to be effective with this tool. It's also a platform where we have like a best practice sharing. People can share the agents that they've built. People could share different use cases. You can actually copy paste agents then into your tool. So really to generate a kind of almost a buzz in community around this topic, because the other thing you need to do is you should get people talking about this, get people to use it, get people to talk about how to use it. It's also super important in terms of leadership. So I also share what I do with AI. It's like, I've built this, I use it for that. And really get that conversation going, get that conversation started. So that's the AI Academy built around the AI space. And then we also have the AI Factory, which is a team of experts when it comes to more complex workflows. That's where, Your average user then quickly hits a limit. Plus, that's where you start to incur additional token costs. So you need to be a bit careful before you build a silly workflow that does nothing but costs a lot of money. You need some support there. So we have a few internal resources, and then we're currently looking at scaling that with freelancers and later even some nearshore capacity, so that as the volume of these work flow generations increase, we can really meet that demand and we don't cause kind of a bottleneck. And this has been, I mean, this has been really astounding, the engagement level, the feedback we get. And this is really the start of this, let's say, change in thinking about how we work. We've finally been able to give this really broad, capable tool into people's hands so that the people who say, hey, we want to change the way we work, we don't know how. It's like, well, here you go. You have the tool now. And so with wave 2 now starting later this month, we actually want to reach more than 50% of the workforce by the end of the year. It's 50% of the installed user base. That's the ambition.
What are the concrete use cases you've seen the most uptake in from the organization?
There's a lot of agents that just help with general research work, for example. So often in, kind of market-facing roles, marketing, etc. There's a lot of activity and agents being built around pulling together numbers for different reports, just, generating slide decks. I mean, these are all the more generic use cases. We are currently working on a more complex workflow-based use case. For example, we call it the touchless invoice project. So, where we're having our business service center handling thousands of invoices every month. And just imagine, I mean, this is an email. The email has a PDF attachment. The PDF attachment is an invoice. You have someone that actually, entering data from that invoice manually into SAP. Kind of crazy, but that's the reality. And I'm sure that's the reality across thousands of organizations. So automating that process now with a more complex workflow, character recognition, and then, basically flanching that onto SAP with the respective APIs and really automating that process currently with a success rate of about 94%. So still not quite perfect, but I mean, huge improvement in terms of automation level and these kind of back office tasks. That would be a concrete use case for more complex applications. A very, very wide range of different use cases, all being able to run on this of what we call the REHAU AI space.
Nils, I cannot imagine a more powerful moment in time to have a venture clienting unit, because it is so clear to everyone, I think, that AI is just absolutely an incredible productivity booster, but most organizations have no idea about how to deal with it, especially not procurement. So I think the fact that REHAU has someone like you working on this is just incredibly important and so interesting and inspiring to hear. We are literally running AMA sessions for VCs where VCs are sharing how they're doing this work. I wonder if we should do something similar in the corporate space. I think that could be interesting to explore with you.
Super, super happy to share. And I always, maybe I'm super biased, kind of dealing a lot with, these startups and different technologies. I thought we're so far behind. I mean, we are behind, but we're in best company, I have to say. So the more I speak with other organizations that are, similar to us, I really see that they are even further behind. So I'm really happy to, be open about what we've been doing, kind of a best practice, knowledge sharing within the industry. Definitely happy to do that, because I think everyone needs to get on board here and just start to be part of the transformation. And, it's funny, when I was a kid in the 90s, I would work for like summer jobs at the company, and I would hand out mail because, we used to have the secretary pool that would type in-house memos and these would then get sent to different locations. And then, I would be there and I would receive it and I would go deliver mail from office to office. And this was in the time that email was being introduced. We had the first, Lotus Notes deployment early mid 90s. And so already then, my job was going to be obsolete a few years down the road. This is, as the internet age has transformed everything in our lives significantly, this is definitely that, but kind of on steroids. So definitely something we need to get on board with. It's the next big change for all of us.
Incredibly exciting. Yeah, but thank you so much for making sure we brought Nils on the podcast. Nils, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Jeppe.